like, I really appreciated this thing that she did, but I just won't go out of my way to mention it. Or life just goes so fast you forget to mention it. I realized that how I handle emotions and the way I would respond to someone who is kind of experiencing complex emotions or crying or whatever is a lot more stoic or like not very emotionally warm. And I had to learn that, oh, what you're needing is a bit more than that. Today we're going to be talking about 3 lessons we've learned that we think will make your relationship stronger. That's a bold claim.
Everyone needs a little lesson here and there to make the relationship stronger.
Yeah, and I feel like these have been lessons we've learned over the last 5 years of being married, but the last 7 years of being together.
You don't go into a relationship or a marriage knowing how to do a relationship perfectly.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of stumble. You learn, and I feel like you're always kind of doing that. I don't
Sometimes
know if you
it's
ever...
awkward.
Yeah, sometimes it gets awkward for sure.
We've had a lot of awkward moments. Okay, the first lesson is this. Design a relationship that works for you.
Yeah.
I think especially in our social media age, it's easy to look to other relationships, not just for inspiration, but for prescription. You get what I mean? It's they're not just inspiring ideas, but they're telling me what to do or setting, almost like charting a course for me and how we should do this relationship.
But those are 2 different people.
Completely different people.
You and your spouse with 2 different lives, 2 different jobs, 2 different challenges.
We should just go down and like keep listing what
2
would be
different haircuts.
Different grandparents, different parents.
2 different
siblings.
Pets, no pets.
But
they have different lives.
The point is, you're completely different than the people you see on social media.
Yeah.
So it's so important for you to design a different relationship than them. And this goes far beyond social media too. It's like your parents' relationships, your siblings' relationships, aunts, uncles. It's important to like go, what works for you, what works for me, what works for us together, and let's build a relationship that works for us. So for example, we don't do gifts for Christmas, which is different. People sometimes look at us sideways when they learn that we don't buy gifts for each other. It's just because we don't really value gifts as much as we do shared experiences.
Like,
so oftentimes
Daniel, for a gift, if he wants a gift, it's like something he needs. You know?
Yeah.
He's like, okay, get me this vacuum.
Get me a toothbrush. Get me new floss, for example.
And I'm like, a gift is supposed to be something that you want, but you wouldn't buy it for yourself. But he just like, and both of us are kind of like that. We're like, okay, let's just do something fun together and put extra money into that instead.
So this year we went for a nice dinner, and we actually, it's funny because you guys are gonna get a window inside of how thrifty we are. We went to the dinner because we had a gift card to that restaurant, but we treated ourselves for Christmas to special drinks.
Yeah, that was nice.
So that was pretty fun. But that's one of the ways where we design a relationship that works for us. So there's sometimes, whether it be Valentine's Day or birthdays, I'll surprise you with something.
Which happens to be both true for you.
What do you mean by that?
Valentine's Day is Daniel's birthday.
Yeah. I just wanted to clarify that because both are true for you. Could have been unclear for someone.
No, I know. I was gonna explain it.
Anyways,
this is a little fun fact about him.
The whole gift thing, in terms of like Christmas, is something that's unique to us that wouldn't work for everyone else because people love gifts way more than we do.
Yeah,
they love receiving gifts and giving gifts way more than we do. But there are things that are in the design of our relationships that are common that a lot of people do. For example, we prioritize walking together because we get some of our best conversations done.
This is a man of efficiency.
We have a lot of good conversations when we walk.
Yes, we do. We do, and a lot of couples do. That's a very common thing. Yeah.
And so there are things that I'm not saying just be different for the sake of being different. So it's like there might be things that you decide to build into your relationship that are very common.
Yeah.
But there might be things that are completely unique to you and your significant other. So the point is, make sure to design a relationship that works for you two.
That's really good. I thought of a helpful example, I think.
Yeah.
Something that could be different between couples is like who's introverted, who's extroverted.
Yeah.
So maybe there is a couple where one person is more introverted and they need that time at home, so they prefer to spend quality time at home with their person. But maybe there's a couple that would rather like an experience to go to a concert with a big crowd, and that's like the funnest thing ever for them. So I just felt like that was a good picture of like how different personalities can experience. Like someone might think going to a concert with a big crowd's like the worst thing ever, and they would hate to do that. You know, but another couple would be like, oh my gosh, we made memories for a lifetime.
Yeah, and one thing I would say too is that it's okay to revisit things. Like we could go maybe 2 years from now, maybe 3 years from now, go like, oh, we should do gifts around Christmas.
Yeah.
Let's start doing them.
Yeah.
I think the point is working together to make sure you're building and designing a relationship that really works and that you both love.
Yeah, that's good.
Second thing.
The second thing is sometimes you should say something when you feel like you shouldn't. And sometimes you shouldn't say something when you feel like you should.
So we want to give a couple examples of both. So there's sometimes where you feel like you should say something and you shouldn't, where you naturally maybe are frustrated with a certain situation and you're running out the door, heading to work. Your spouse is either heading to work with you and you're both rushing, or they're at home and you feel like saying the thing that's on your mind out of frustration. In that context, you might not want to say the thing because
you're stressed, you're frustrated, you're irritated.
You're running late.
Yeah.
It's like maybe you circle back to it at dinner time or never come back to it
Yeah, or maybe
at all.
you realize you don't even care about it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then other times when you should say something you feel like you shouldn't, I feel like there's a couple different examples of this. Sometimes I feel like it's like vulnerable things, like, hey, I'm feeling really sad lately, or I'm feeling really anxious lately, and that can be hard to let your spouse in because it's vulnerable. Or it could be things that you are frustrated with about your spouse, and you know you need to bring it up, but you don't want to upset them, or you don't want to create a fight, so you're not quite sure how to say it, so you just end up avoiding saying it and building resentment. And in that case, it's like you got to say something. You have to figure out how to say it in a kind way and how to work through those things together.
And this is a small one that I notice in myself that I try to like hack myself out of is encouragements. Sometimes we're like, oh, like I really appreciated this thing that she did, but I just won't go out of my way to mention it. Or life just goes so fast you forget to mention it.
Yeah.
But that's an example of a context where you feel like maybe not saying something, or it doesn't come naturally to you to say something, but you should say something.
Yeah.
So it's like an encouragement would go a long way, but you feel like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Like she did something awesome that I appreciated, but I just won't. Like it's almost like sometimes we'll go like not saying something is like an encouragement, but it's not.
Yeah.
Like you should say something.
I feel like you're kind of touching on the context of like doing stuff like acts of service that you notice or something, but I feel like even greater than that, just like encouraging your spouse as a person. Yeah. I feel like sometimes we forget how meaningful that is to one another. Like you forget like, no, this is the person that means the most to you in your life. So if they're saying something to you that's encouraging about who you are as a person, not just like a chore you did or like a gift you gave or whatever, then that is so uplifting. Because it's like, I feel like we're so good at that when we're dating. Like, in those beginning stages of the relationship, like our texts used to be so long to each other, and like we would just.
We never send goodnight texts now. We never send goodnight texts.
Because we say our goodnight texts.
Yeah.
But you know, like that comes so naturally in dating because you're so like infatuated with the person. You're just like, oh my gosh, I love you so much, and I love this about you and this about you, because you're discovering them.
Yeah.
But it's like when you're married, you often, I think, forget to really speak out what you love about that person and what you love about the character. Of course, maybe you do that at birthdays or certain times of the year, but like making it more of a regular thing can sometimes be a bit vulnerable, and I feel like people don't say it.
It's like being deliberate about like intentional discovery. So it's like, like you mentioned, when you're dating someone, you're discovering them, you're intentional. And I think that there's a temptation to leave that intentionality or leave that discovery in the dating phase. But as you're married, like you always have to look for ways, discover ways to appreciate your spouse or discover things that you love about them, and then be intentional about like naming those things and bringing them up as well.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Okay, what's the third one?
The third lesson that we learned that I think would help anyone in a relationship is learning the way your spouse is best cared for. Mm-hmm. And recognizing sometimes the ways in which you most naturally care for someone isn't actually the way that your spouse is best cared for.
Yeah, that's good.
Or the way your spouse needs to receive care isn't what comes most naturally to you as well.
Yeah, like just to give an example, I feel like for me, what comes naturally to me is like physical touch or quality time or just really like sitting down and hashing things out. But maybe what you'd appreciate sometimes more is like acts of service.
Yeah.
So like making sure our house is like kept up and cleaned and or just like doing little special things for you or making a meal or whatever it is. And just because that doesn't come as naturally to me doesn't mean I just never do it. Yeah. It's like it means actually I work towards doing that because that's what makes you feel loved and seen and chosen and cherished and appreciated.
I love all those words. Love, chosen, cherished, appreciated.
Yeah.
I like what you hit on just there when you were saying that, just because it doesn't come naturally to you doesn't mean you can just not do it.
Yeah.
We mentioned this in another video, but there was a point in our relationship where I realized that how I handle emotions and the way I would respond to someone who is kind of experiencing complex emotions or are crying or whatever is a lot more stoic or like not very, I guess, emotionally warm. Mm-hmm. And I had to learn that, what you're needing is a bit more than that.
Yeah.
Like I remember there was one time I did something pretty significant. Now I see it's significant. In response to a moment where Mariah was crying, I sat with her as she cried for maybe 10, 15 minutes. And then I kind of thought it was like done. She just kind of had to take some time just to keep crying by herself. So I pulled out my phone, not knowing that wouldn't be appreciated by her.
Like he just pulled out his phone to just start scrolling.
Yeah, I was like scrolling, responding to emails, and it just wasn't the most emotionally wise thing in that moment. And I remember I realized, I guess in that moment, that there's a lot to be said about providing for your significant other.
Yeah.
Like you to me and me to you. Mm-hmm. And people talk about financially providing, people talk about socially providing, like doing things for the person around the house or just in life. Maybe there's a form that you need filled out that I'll fill out for you. But I think that something that I needed to realize in that moment is emotionally providing in the best way that I can is a form of providing. Mm-hmm. Like, so oftentimes, specifically with men, there's this like identity in a relationship of provider. Mm-hmm. And we'll be like, oh, I'll protect you.
Yeah.
I'll provide financially.
It's very like tangible.
Yeah. But it's like, as a man, I realize it's just as much my job to make you feel emotionally safe and cared for. And I can't just be like, oh, this doesn't come naturally to me, so I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
I have to like learn mechanisms and gain tools that will help me come alongside you.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning this. I have a long way to go still, but.
And I think like on the other side of things, like I had a responsibility to tell you, hey, like when you went on your phone, like kind of hurt me. Like I still needed you to be present with me. Because if I never said that to you, maybe you would have never realized how significant that was for me and what I needed. Yeah. So like I feel like we forget we have like our spouse, that people say all this all the time. Your spouse isn't a mind reader, okay? Yeah. They're not going to know exactly what you need. You need to tell them. Yeah. And I think there's something like feels awkward about like telling them what you need and them doing it. Like it just feels like transactional or something. Yeah. But I promise over time it gets better. It becomes
more natural.
Because since that phone moment, that was like a couple years ago or whatever, like I feel like you so naturally care for me when I'm crying or when I'm emotional or whatever, and I don't even think about it anymore. Yeah. But maybe we'd still be way back there if I never said anything about it.
Yeah, and I think that like something I think about too, just to like hammer home this point, is that the essence of a relationship is like two separate natures coming together, like your nature and my nature coming together. So there's going to be things that your nature needs that are against or don't come naturally to my personality.
Yeah.
And so it's not my job to say, oh, it's against my nature, so I'm not going to do it. It's like, no, I'm going to train my nature to better cater to your nature. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I think that people have to put in the work. We can't just say, this doesn't come naturally to me. We have to work to train our natures so that we can better support our spouses.
Yeah, that's so good. And it's like, I've said this before, like your marriage is worth the work. Yeah. It's going to be hard work, but it's worth it. Like that's a lifetime commitment, probably the biggest decision you made in your life. So you might as well put some work into it to make it a good decision and make it something that's beautiful and enjoyable for your whole life, right?
Yeah, yeah. And there'll be times where, your natures rub up against each other and there'll be rough moments. But it's like learning each other, learning how to serve each other. That's what, again, that's why it's like so significant when the Bible refers to marriages as two becoming one. And it's like, two natures become one at marriage, but also they continue to become one as you continue to allow your nature to better fit within the other person's nature. You know what I mean?
That's so good.
Yeah. So if you have any other thoughts on lessons you've learned, maybe you're married, maybe you're not married, but you have tons of marriage advice, we'd love to see that in the comments.
Or even if you have questions about relationships, about marriage, about challenges that maybe you're having, we'd love to hear your questions. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So comment below. Yeah. And if you haven't already, make sure to like this video and subscribe. And if there's a video that stands out to you, maybe it's this one, that you think someone else in your life would benefit from, make sure to share it with them. It'd mean a lot to us, and I'm sure it'd help a friend out as well. Awesome. We'll talk to you next time.